So in the last video we left off being able to send messages. What we're going to do in this video is we're going to make the left side menu work so that we can click between users and choose who we want to send a message to. So the first thing we have to do is get a list of anyone who's ever sent us a message and anyone we've ever sent a message to. So to get that list, I'm going to go back to the API and create another endpoint. And it's going to be a GET request, and we're going to just copy this. And we're going to replace auth with users for a list of users we've sent messages to. So the first thing we have to do is obviously get the user ID of the person who's logged in. So we do that as always, and we call it user ID. And then what we're going to do is we're going to run a query. So we're going to say db query. So this query just selects the sender and the receiver from messages. It does this left join so we can convert the ID we get from the messages table into a username using the users table. And this where clause at the end just means that we're only going to get senders and receivers that relate to the user who's logged in. So in this case, we've said the user with the ID of 1, but this ID will be the ID of whoever is logged in at the current time. So we're going to copy that query and we're going to paste it in here. We're going to scroll across and we're going to replace this 1 with the ID of the person who's logged in. So in this case, it's going to be user ID and it's going to be equal to user ID. And then in here, we're just going to replace this with user ID and this one with user ID. Then we're just going to print and we'll call this users. And you can see here is the output of our query. So we're just going to say for each users as user, and we'll go up here and we'll create an array and we'll just call it u, and it's going to be an empty array. And what we're going to do is we're just going to check if the values in here are in this array. So we're going to say if in array user receiver is in the array that we've called u, which is our array up here, then we don't want to add it again. So we're just going to invert that so that if it isn't in the array, we're going to say array push, and we'll push into the user's array the value user receiver. And we'll copy this and just do the same for sender. And then at the end of that, we're just going to print _r, the new array we've just created, and we'll just make sure that we have a capital S and a capital R for receiver and sender because those are going to be the values that we get in the array, because you can see up here receiver and sender have a capital letter. So here's our finished array. It has Francis, Francis McNamee and howCode. And if we wanted to stop people from being able to send messages to themselves, so what we're going to do is we're just going to echo that out as JSON. So we're going to say echo JSON encode our array of usernames. Now we have our JSON, and what we want to do is go back to the messages page, and when we load the page we want to send an AJAX request as we're already doing. We want to copy this one and we want to send another AJAX request. So this time we're going to send the request to API/users. So what we're going to do is we're now going to insert the data into this HTML. So here's our list group, and what we're going to do is we're going to give it an ID of users, and we're going to just copy one of these items and delete the rest. And down here, when we get all the data back, and what we're going to do when we get the data back is we're going to encode it as JSON. So we're going to say r equals json.parse itself, and now we're going to loop through it. So we're going to create a for loop. And when we loop through it, what we're going to do is we're just going to append into that div. So to do that, we're just going to use jQuery to select our users element, and we're going to append some HTML. So the HTML we're going to append is this. So we've appended this HTML, and now if I was to refresh, we now have 3 divs because we have 3 users returned, and they all say the same thing. So I'm just going to get rid of that profile photo for now, and what we're going to do is we're going to store the username. So in this case, the way we get the username is we just say ri because we're returning an array, so we're just accessing the first element, second element, third element. Now if I refresh, we have our actual data, and we could change the background colors to white. And finally, what we want to do is we want to create a click event so that when we click on this, it changes our address bar so that sender becomes whatever the ID of this user is. And now what we're going to do is we're going to give each of these an individual ID. We're going to call it something like user I, so user 1, user 2, user 3, something like that. And then we're going to target that down here. We're going to say user I.click. And what we're also going to do is we're going to say data ID equals, and in here what we're going to do is we're going to pass ri.id, and then over here we're going to scroll across and rename this to ri.username. So back in the API, what we're going to do, instead of just returning a list of usernames, we're going to return the ID as well. So to do that, we're going to select the usernames, and we're going to select s.id as sender ID and r.id as receiver ID. Then what we're going to do when we push into our array, what we're going to do, instead of pushing just the username, we're going to push another array, and that array is going to have 2 items in it, the receiver and the receiver ID, and we're going to do the same for the sender, and the sender ID. Just like this. And we're actually going to give these a name, so we're going to say username equals receiver and ID equals receiver ID, and then down here we'll do the same. Username is equal to the sender's name, and the ID is equal to the sender's ID. So whenever we click on one of these items, what we're going to do is we're going to say this attribute, and we're going to get the ID attribute. So we're going to say data ID, and that's how we get the ID of the user. So we're going to log that to the console. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on one of these, and you can see we're getting the user IDs printed out to the console. And because we're getting duplicates, what we want to do is, instead of checking if in array and then checking just the username, we want to copy this line here and check that whole line, and do the same down here. Now when I refresh, you can see we only get 3 usernames returned. So instead of just logging that to the console, we're going to say window.location equals, and we're going to say it's equal to messages.html, and then we're going to put the hash in there, and we're just going to append on the ID, and then we're going to scroll up to the top, and sender is going to be equal to window.location.hash.split, and we want to split on the hash itself and access the first element of that array, because by default window.location.hash looks like this. So we just want to get rid of that hash and just be left with the number. And we're just going to put in a jQuery event actually as well. And we're going to say window.on, and we'll say hash change. So when the hash in the URL changes, we're going to run a function, and it's going to be equal to location.reload, and that's going to reload the page. So you can see on the messages page at the moment there's no messages because we haven't clicked on one. So if I click on Francis McNamee, you can see the 7 shows up in the address bar and the messages appear. If I click on howCode, you can see now more messages appear, and I can send messages just like before. And what I want to do is also just, instead of saying window.location is equal to nothing, I'm going to say location.reload. So just like before, I can send messages. I can type a message in here, click send, and there's the new message there. But that's it for this video. Don't forget to like, comment, favorite, and subscribe. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Reddit. But that's it for this video, and I'll see you next time.